there! Today I'm talking about the contract to close process and creating a contract to close checklist. But before we embark on this adventure, please hit the subscribe button. It's like a high five for the real estate soul. Now let's dive into the magical world of closings. If this is your first time visiting my channel, my name is Carrie Jonicas and I am the owner and a transaction manager at Amplify Transaction Services. If you would like to find out more information about how we can help you, you can visit our website at www.amplifiedtransactions.com. I'm going to walk you through creating a contract to close checklist. Please keep in mind that every area is a little bit different, so there may be specifics to your area or your brokerage that I don't discuss that you may want to add to your checklist. First, I like to go through the process and write down all of the steps. Go through it in your mind and go through the steps. Once you get that contract, what happens? Since buyer and seller transactions can have different tasks, I recommend creating a checklist, one for the buyer side and then one for the seller side. All right, let's get started. So I took the liberty of already drafting the steps in the contract to close process. First, putting it in document form, listing out all of the things that I'm going to do in the contract. Again, a friendly reminder that your checklist might look a little bit different based on the state that you're working in. I did basically like a generalized one as far as writing repair requests and things, but there's going to be certain things in your state that you likely will have to add. So going through on the buyer side, once you have that executed or ratified binding agreement, you are going to, we're going to review the documents, make sure that we're not missing any document signatures or initials. We're going to save the documents to the file system. So we use Google Drive. You could use Google Drive, OneDrive. I do recommend that you use some sort of cloud-based service instead of putting it onto your computer, because if anyone needs to access that at any time, it makes it much easier to share that information if you're out and about than if it's on your computer and you're out on a showing. It's really hard for you to share that information. And then we create the transaction in our transaction management system. If you don't use a transaction management system at this time, you may want to put that into your spreadsheet. At the end of this video, I'm going to give you kind of a glimpse of a spreadsheet that you can utilize to get started. I do get a lot of calls from agents who are asking me, hey, I don't think I'm really ready yet for a transaction coordinator. What do you recommend to be able to get a little bit more organized? And I think a spreadsheet is a great idea because it's free and it allows you to kind of just have everything all on one sheet and gets you going and organized without investing a lot of time for setup or investing in a transaction management software, which can be costly. And then once you add the information into your transaction management software, then I typically will make a note of any documents that I am missing that I have to follow up on. So I make sure that I am keeping everything all in one place. So I have lots of notes on that. Then I'm going to make introductions to all parties and make sure that all parties have a copy of those documents. And then if there is anything that I'm working to obtain, so I don't want to hold documents back for instance, the lender or the title company, they want to get started on the file, especially if there's a quick closing. So I'll just let them know, hey, page 1 is missing an initial by the seller. I'm working to obtain that. I will get back to you with the correct documents once I have them. That way they can get working on the file, but they know that something is coming. And then if there is a referral fee due, I'll just make a note in my transaction management software so I know, depending on your process for your brokerage, it either can be taken at the closing table or your brokerage has to handle that referral fee. So either way, you want to make note of that referral fee so you know you have to let your broker know that there's a referral fee, or if the closing attorney or title company needs to know that there's a referral fee that should be paid at closing. We then will update the documents to the compliance system. We'll reach out to the lender and make sure that we have a copy of an FHA or VA addendum if it's required. We're going to add all key dates to the calendar. A lot of agents like this, a lot of them don't. So I think it's really helpful, even when you have a transaction coordinator, to know what is coming up. That way, if something ever happened and your coordinator got sick or something, or they're on vacation, you have access to all of that information and it reminds you as the date comes up. Then we need to work on getting inspections scheduled, let the buyer know of the process that the inspection is, what the process of the inspection period is, what's going to happen at the inspection, what happens after the inspection. Then we're going to make sure that the buyer has a copy of the HOA bylaws, make sure the buyer has a copy of the insurance declarations from the seller and a copy of the elevation certificate if it's in a flood zone. If it's not in a flood zone, then we don't have to worry about that. Writing up a repair addendum with any repairs that the buyer would like. Ensure that the repairs have been agreed upon. Following up with the lender to make sure that the application has been submitted, title request has been made, and the buyer has submitted all required documents. We're going to work on scheduling the closing, obtain repair requests or repair receipts. Obtain those repair receipts from the seller's agent. Ensure the appraisal has been ordered, scheduled, and come in at value. Remind buyer to obtain that insurance. They might have used the declarations that we provided them to get the same insurance that the seller had, or maybe they used that to get a better rate somewhere else. Or the home warranty. Assist the buyer with connecting utilities. Following up with the lender to ensure that they have insurance information and all required documents from the buyer. And confirm when we will receive the clear to close. We're going to follow up with the buyer, attorney, title company, or lender, and the seller's agent a week prior to closing. And then we will request a copy of the settlement statement to review. And then once we close, we're going to send a thank you letter to the client for their trust in our services. And then we will ask them for a review. We can ask them for a review a week prior to closing, or we can ask them at closing. Just depends on what your comfort level is. So you might want to add that to your checklist. Okay, now on to the seller side. The seller side is very much like the buyer side. However, there will be a few differences. So, of course, we have the contract that has been ratified, reviewing the documents, creating that transaction. All of this is the same. And then adding the notes, uploading the documents to compliance system, reaching out to the lender, adding the key dates, confirming the buyers schedule the inspections. You want to add that in there just to kind of keep an eye on it. But of course, depending on what your contract states, you're not necessarily going to follow up and say, hey, did you schedule your inspection? Do you want any repairs? That's up to the buyer's agent to do that, right? So you want to let them make those inspections. But it's good to know, like, hey, has the inspection been scheduled? Like, just to keep an eye on things. We always let the seller know what the process of the inspection is. We generally would like to send a reminder to the seller and let them know, what happens at the inspection, what they can do to prepare for the inspection. And I have found sending out the email to let them know what to expect during that inspection, even if they've sold a home before, it helps to have that information. And it also helps to have an inspection that is, more clear. So, asking them to make sure that all the lights in the house work, that they're not missing any light bulbs, because that's the first thing that comes up. We couldn't get the light to turn on. Is it a light bulb or is it an electrical problem? Please make sure that it works. So, being proactive and asking them to do these things is really helpful. And checking their furnace filter. We have a whole big list of things that, we would ask the seller to do prior to this inspection. And even though we're on the seller side, we still want to make sure the buyer has a copy of the HOA bylaws. So making sure that we ask for that from the seller if they have a copy, or finding them online, or directing them to obtain a copy from the HOA management company. And then making sure that the buyer has a copy of those insurance declarations. Of course, we're not representing the buyer, but we always like to send that information over to the buyer's agent from the seller. So when the seller sends us the information, we want to get that over. We're going to confirm receipt that we have of the repair addendum. Again, we're not going to be hounding them, asking the other agent for it, because we're on the seller side. It's up to the buyer's agent to get that to us. We're going to make sure that we have an agreement on all of the repairs so we can move forward. Even though we're on the seller side, we're still going to follow up with that lender to make sure the application has been submitted, title request has been made, and buyer has submitted all required documents. We're going to make sure that the closing has been scheduled. We're going to obtain any receipts from the seller, which on my list says seller's agent because I am a transaction coordinator. And so I'm going to receive those either from the seller's agent or seller. Usually the seller's agent is sending those to me, but we can definitely reach out to the seller to get those receipts. And a lot of times we're actually helping to coordinate those repairs as well. So maybe not even getting that from the seller's agent, but from the actual contractor who did the work. We're still making sure that the appraisal has been ordered, scheduled, and it's come in at value. When the appraisal has been scheduled, we do also send an email out to the buyer's agent and letting them know that it has been scheduled, because the lenders typically don't communicate that very well to our buyer's agents. So I always like to add that communication over to the buyer's agent. So that's a great thing to add to your checklist as well. And then we don't necessarily remind the buyer to obtain insurance, but we will remind the buyer's agent if the lender says that they haven't received it yet. We can order the home warranty depending on what the contract states. We're going to collect utility information from the seller and then forward it to the buyer's agent to forward to the buyer. We're still following up with the lender to make sure that they have that insurance information and all required documents from the buyer and confirm when we receive the clear to close. Then we're going to follow up with the seller, attorney, title company, or lender, and buyer's agent a week prior to closing. Request a copy of that settlement statement. And again, thank you for their trust in their business. This is just a brain dump of everything that I would do in the transaction. And then I'll use this information to then create my transaction management software's checklist, or inside of a spreadsheet, then I would put this information in, and that would become my system for managing my transactions. Again, if you would like a copy of this information that I have on the screen here, or a copy of my spreadsheet checklist, feel free to click the link in the description box below, and I would be happy to send it to you. Now that we have all the steps, we can build our checklist off of this. What system will you use to manage your transactions? If you're not sure, you may want to watch the video that I did going over the best systems for managing your transactions. For the sake of this video, let's use a Google spreadsheet to input all of your tasks into. Would you like a copy of my spreadsheet and checklist for free? Fill out the form in the description box below. Thank you so much for stopping by, and if you want to stay in the loop on all the cool stuff we're doing here, make sure to ring that notification bell. It's like our secret handshake but digital. I'll see you on the next one.